Okay. I'm as easy as you are. So it's cool.
And for today, we have Brunel Johnson. Brunel Johnson is a street and commercial documentary, lifestyle and sports photographer based in London, who specialises in capturing everyday life, particularly in BAME communities in both London and the Gambia. Brunel's commercial work has seen him shooting for the likes of brands such as Timberland and Adidas, the latter including photographing Lionel Messi and Paul Pogba for global football campaigns. His personal photographic projects, such as Can You See Me Now, explore the complex themes of identity and the life experiences and struggles of people from BAME communities. While another project, for example, called It's My Hair, emphasises the intricacies involved in maintaining Afro-Caribbean hair and the prejudices or unwanted attention that can be faced by those who possess sort of supposedly unconventional hairstyles or types. Other personal projects highlight and help raise awareness of a variety of social issues such as recovery, which used photographs of the scarred body of a victim of a stabbing in northwest London in order to help tackle the stigma and trauma of knife crime, and Mattress Campaign, which aimed to tackle poverty and sleep deprivation in the Gambia by sort of hoping to provide high-quality second-hand mattresses to families who then might possess really old mattresses or mattresses that might be shared between lots of family members, for example. As such, Brunel can be described as not only a photographer and a filmmaker, but also a humanitarian, and very rightly so. We're very happy to have you here today with us, Brunel, so thank you for taking time to speak with us. So we'll begin with a short talk by Brunel, followed by an interview by myself, and then we'll open the floor up to Q&As by the audience. If any of you have bought any work, like prints or digital photographs, that you want to show Brunel and get feedback from, or you want to share any personal photographic projects of your own, you're more than welcome to do so at the end, or to join us if we might be going to the pub after the talk. So yeah, feel free to contribute and engage. So yeah, thank you, Brunel. Hopefully you can take your turn on this lectern here.
Good evening, everyone. Obviously, forgive me. I was like nervous as it can be, talking to everyone about my work, talking about myself. So let me introduce myself. My name is Brunel Johnson. I'm a documentary photographer from Kilburn, northwest London, and my journey to photography is an unusual one. So I started out as I wanted to be a mathematician, so I wanted to work in investment banking or become a teacher. But along the way, during the journey, I ended up having a life experience that led me towards photography. And when I started photography, I found it very difficult to find photographers who looked like me, who sounded like me, who were doing things that wasn't expected of them. So being a photographer, being from the black community, and the partly Arab community, as a photographer, as a black photographer, you tend to expect us to be either doing music or anything down those fields. So we're either documenting musicians, artists, celebrities. This is usually where you find black photographers. But in order to find photographers that were actually focused on stuff like documentary, stuff like lifestyle, it was very difficult. And in fact, it was only until my actual second year as a photographer that I came across the works of people like Gordon Parks and Roy DiCarava. And for me, I don't cry down photographers of my community that focus on music, but I also believe that a lot more spaces need to be made for photographers who need to tell the story of what's going on within our communities. And one of the situations that I realized this to be true was my first trip to West Africa, to Gambia. Coming from London, coming from a council estate, I never really knew much about the outside world. In fact, how Africa was perceived to me was it was full of poverty, destitute, that everyone's gonna rob you, someone's gonna do some magic on you or something like that, and everything's just grey, But when I actually went there, I found it to be more colourful. I found it to be so colourful that I said to myself, why am I even in the UK? Like, the UK is just pure dullness, grey and red. Whereas when I went to, for example, places like the Gambia, I was seeing a woman wear pink and orange and it worked. I was seeing buildings that were painted blue, painted orange, and it worked. And the effect of colours on a community is serious, as it actually has a big effect, because what happens is the colours means that you can't have like dull situations, you can't have moods. Everyone was content, but you realize that this could be due to the colours. And as I continued to dig deeper into the African continent, Sierra Leone, Egypt, the Gambia, I realized that a lot of the stereotypical information that I was taught was actually a lie. That a lot of the poverty that was shown by some charities was exaggerated. That yes, there was poverty, but within that poverty, I found some of the most content and some of the most happiest people that it made me question myself to say, if these people have nothing and they're happy, and I'm supposed to be from the West, have everything that, and I'm not happy, what's going on? What is really happening? So this triggered my passion to start telling stories that were related to me and to find the means to do so. So, yeah, talking about myself is difficult, but yeah, you know. So I started out as a street photographer. I would walk the streets of London because one, there wasn't many places for me to learn photography. Studios were expensive. Um, there's a lot of nepotism that exists within the photography industry, where it's who you know, and when you come from a certain background, you kind of have to either destroy that barrier yourself or play the game. I'm not one to play games, so I like to destroy things. So I did my best to destroy the barriers, and I started to learn from street photography how I can use photography for on the streets where I'm used to enter the different fields of photography. I don't know if many of you know this, but in terms of street photography, if you can master street photography, every genre of photography becomes easy, because on the streets is where you learn how to do portraiture, it's where you learn how to do documentary, you could do sports, you could do all sorts of genres of photography for free, basically just being on the streets. So I used this as a means to hone my craft and learn how to do things and eventually break through. So with with street photography, I realized that a lot of people were focusing on areas that had no benefit to me. So when I say no benefit to me, I mean I grew up on a council estate. My life was based around dodging gang areas, dodging gang codes, postcode wars. That's my life. I'm used to that. So when people were saying, "Oh, you got to go to Soho, you got to go to Oxford Street, you have to go here and there to take the photos that's going to make you famous," I said, "How does that work for me? How do I fit in here if I have no relation to these places where my whole life is based on the community that I grew up on, which is my council estate or the council estates that are around me?" So I said to myself, you know what? We're gonna have to just use the camera as a what do you call it, as a passport. So when I say passport, is coming from my area, you could be in one estate and you could have problem in another estate. And photography is the bridge that allows you to cover both estates without having a problem. Because in both sides of these estates, there's people that want to become musicians. There's people that want to get their work out there, but they need someone to do it. So with having the camera on you at times kind of gave you like a visa into areas you would never go to. And this camera allowed me to, people that I once thought were my enemies became my closest friends. They opened up their houses to me, and I was able to start documenting things which, even though I was helping them, they were helping me. And before photography, this was never possible. So this is one of the reasons why I continued doing what I do and try to bring out the stories that I bring out. Um, yeah. So come back to talking about being told to go to Soho, go to Oxford Street to take my photography. I said I want to focus on what's close to me. I read actually that in order to grow, you need to understand what's around you. So a lot of us tend to want to photograph something that's by that door over there and forget or leave what is close to us. Where in order for us to get to that door, we first need to master what's in front of us, utilize it, and move forward and continue going forward. And this is what over the years I've learned to kind of do. So here is a project, an orphanage in the Gambia. So as I said at the beginning, when I went to Africa, I realized that a lot of the charities were over exaggerating, or poverty porn as they call it, when it comes to black kids, especially black poor kids in these countries. So my goal was to partner up with an NGO, a local NGO based in Gambia, run by Gambians, and our goal was to change the way that these kids in this country were shown. So in these photos here, which you probably see more after, are kids that have lost both parents, have no family members, and are living within an orphanage. So I wanted to show with my camera the day-to-day lives of these kids. I wanted to show that yes, they have no advantages, but still still show the human dignity that remains. So my photos are all focusing about positivity, and I believe you can help whilst maintaining human dignity, whereas showing someone as an object. So I continued with that. Um, with It's My Hair, I don't know. It's a close one to home, but it's hard to explain because growing up, if we had an afro in school, our teachers would tell us to um, either shave it, clean shave, buzz cut, or have it neat according to their standards. But there's a lot of how do you call it? What was it? There's a lot of effort and time that goes into maintaining black hair that the wider community doesn't understand. And It's My Hair was focused on telling these stories and showing how these people go about getting their hair done, and that it's not just something that they could just do 1 hour and it's done, and they could just give up and just say, yeah, just go shave it off. You can't have this at work. There's a whole process that goes with it. There's a lot of maintaining, a lot of hair care, a lot of money invested into maintaining black hair. And sometimes from experience, if you talk about a situation, it falls upon deaf ears. Whereas photography gives you the ability to send a message ahead so that no one knows who it is that is sending the actual message. People absorb it, people digest it before you start the conversation. And with this, it's a really powerful tool in order to bring about changes within communities. So that's It's My Hair. This is basically me just documenting street photography around London and creating a whole project around it called Bus 316. So the 316 bus route is the bus route which is basically outside my house. And depending on what time of day you find, or what time of day you're out and about, you see all kinds of different characters. So I wanted to build a project that showed this, to show the diversity within the area, and also how interesting it can be just documenting one single bus. Okay. This is just work I did with the Times to document the values of George the Poet and his mum. As you can see, George the Poet is also someone that's come from an estate close to mine, where had it not been for photography, me and him would probably never be speaking. And it just changes a lot of situations that goes on. I don't know. Has anyone ever seen that middle photo before? No? No one's come across it? Okay, interesting. That's cool. So on June 6th, 2020, obviously was the Black Lives Matter marches that were going on. And I decided to take a film camera with me just to see what kind of people were attending these so-called marches. So on this day was the first time I actually went out to a march or to any sort of protest. And I just wanted to capture people that were actually going there and the reasons for it. So I created a whole, like, what's it called, a photo story based on each person telling the reason they came out and why today or that day was important to them. I know a lot of photos focused on like the big crowds, but when you hear someone like what's his name, Henry Carter Bresson, talk about his idea or his proposal to focus on the individuals instead of the actual crowd, you learn that really and truly protests are more focused or more potent when you do focus on the individuals that are coming than the actual crowd itself, because the crowd kind of loses its way depending on who's within the photo, whereas that person that you actually capture could actually tell a whole story and everything. And that middle photo there is what kind of ignited my um, photography career. Would I say that? Or took me more seriously. So it won the Portrait of Britain Award and was the book cover. And it kind of opened up a lot of doors because I don't know why, but it kind of opened up a lot of doors that allows me to become who I am today and actually tell the stories that I want to tell today. Okay. Okay. Obviously, I know this is not a lot of. It's like just two photos, two photos. There's going to be a whole lot more that's shown after. But with overzealous policing, as I said, coming from a council estate, there's a lot of stories and a lot of things that you can't talk about because always there's someone that's going to say you're lying, you're exaggerating, you're not telling the truth. So in documenting overzealous policing, it was to show the actual situation occurs when a black man is stopped in the UK, in London, for example, by police. The aggression that goes on, the actual overpowerment and overuse of power that actually goes on, and this is something that I had to show. So we're walking down the street, and one of the guys from the estate has been told that he matches a description. The description is vague. There's nothing going on more. Before you know it, it's like there's 15 different cars, two different sets of police dogs. All of them are just coming after him, but no one's given the right information. No one's given the right details. They're just given a vague description. And again, in this situation, having a camera had the police kind of in a situation where what they would normally get away with, they wouldn't. They would have probably got away with, but with a camera in hand and actually shooting, kind of kept police in a situation where they're like, mm, and I know a lot of you guys will not understand what I'm talking about, but hopefully someone in here understands that the camera actually has saved a lot of situations for me and for the people around me in terms of stuff like this. So obviously here's some more random vague. I don't know if you can see, but at the back you've got like the little child watching. Can you see it there? There. And this here was a big moment for me because growing up, this is what we saw. So imagine having been told that the police are for you, are supporting you, are here to protect you. But as a young kid, like most of us, from where I'm from, is you're seeing this and you're thinking, is this person really here to defend me? Is he really here to protect me? And it's stuff like this that makes you think what needs to change. And then finally, of my little presentation here is the Can You See Me Now project. Can You See Me Now is a project that I built out of frustration, to be honest. So in 2021, I was going through a period where I was going up for jobs. I'd reach the last stage of the job in which you get hired for, and everything's been cemented. Yes, 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 yes. But then I'd reach this one colonial, old-minded person, or let's say the head director, the CEO, or whatever that needs to sign it off, the chief creative director. This person would just suddenly just turn around and say to his team no. And you'd ask, what's going on? Why is it? Why is it so? And there'll be no answer back, no return, nothing. It's just a straight no, and you're just supposed to take it. And most times, a lot of people don't understand that in order to get a commercial job, there's a lot of work that goes in that's unpaid, which is building a treatment, sourcing out locations. All of these things take time, which you're not paid for, but no one actually talks about it. Because why? At the end of the day, when you do get the job and you do get paid, it kind of just brushes it all aside. But if you do all of this and then you're told, sorry, no, but there's no real explanation why, it leaves you in a position like, am I not good enough? Or what is going on? So Can You See Me Now came about as a means to talk about the situations that each different group of people go through. So you have the black male, you have the black female, you have the Chinese, and you have the hijabis. Each one talking about their situation and why what living in Britain has actually meant and caused them.
Do I hear chink?
I started to hear my stomach sink.
Flight or fight?
I hear a ring.
Is it time to bring out my sling? When I was a little girl, I learned what was supposed to be attractive.
I was walking down the street, my anxiety was active.
Cars would drive by and they would shout out,
Fried rice. Do you find it funny? When I spoke up, it came across aggressive, when really I was just speaking because you expected me to be submissive.
what do you expect? I spoke out, yet you were dismissive. You felt slapped when I confronted you with the facts.
But it's not all about you. You tried to put me in a box when you don't even know me.
Did I ask for your opinion?
No.
If I did, that would be another story. You try to define me by how I look. You say ching chong. I don't think you're talking to me. You've got it completely wrong.
I don't speak that language. You get my name wrong. Because you think I look like Lisa.
You compare me to Lucy. You tell me I look like Jessica.
Your next door neighbour, your classmate, your teacher. Do me a favour.
Shut your mouth. It's kind of ironic when they say that we can't see, when they're the ones that are projecting their insecurity.
So who's the one that can't see clearly?
And now it's time to strip down those beliefs that were never mine to begin with.
I embrace my naked self.
My authentic self.
I am more than my appearance. They say, this made you stronger, but I was already solid.
They say, look how far you've come, but maybe I could have been further without all this drama.
I refuse to be a victim.
I am not a victim.
Anyways, if you want to play the blame game, how about looking at yourself first? Do you think spreading hate would bring about a positive change? Do you think bringing down someone makes you feel better? It just shows how powerless you feel deep inside.
You put out these labels and stereotypes which parts of society has validated.
Oh right, you picked maths. No, I didn't. Sir?
Do you think you're properly educated because of where you work?
To tell you the truth, I don't know much about history, maths, or geography. But what I do know is, I am no less or more than you.
They tell me that I'm oppressed,
but I follow a religion that hasn't progressed.
That the cloth I choose to wear on my head is a symbol of being suppressed.
but in reality,
It's such a shame that I live in a world where we are just so obsessed.
With our exterior that we have completely forgotten what makes us truly blessed.
So, when you are surrounded by those who think freedom is about getting undressed.
Then let me suggest this so-called liberation they call you to is nothing more than
A loss of your self-confidence and respect.
the twisted standards of this society are like copying what you see on social media to make this world impress.
Don't mistake my silence for your victory.
And don't mistake my kindness as my weakness.
Because if I start to open up my mouth, I might leave you a little speechless.
You see, this disease is not meant to be the malignant tumor trapped inside your chest.
But despite this lie that you've been sold, there's something that you need to be told.
That no matter what anyone else says, that you are better than the most finest of gold.
So remember this when you crouch down low in your car seat, scared someone will notice you because of the garment you chose to lay upon your head. That you shouldn't stop covering up because of this media catastrophe.
Your hijab is a sense of your individuality.
The hijab is a symbol of modesty.
The hijab is who you are and your identity.
Being a lover of peace and serenity.
It symbolizes all the virtues you need to uphold, like dignity and respect.
You see, the hijab is a sense of honor given to you by God.
It's a symbol of your faith, then to make it known who you truly are, a woman of piety,
Not a slave to society,
but a slave to Allah.
I hear the phrase black girl magic a lot.
But I've never seen Madeline cast a spell so strong to stand the hand of death.
I wish I could conjure a childhood worthy enough for black girls, overwhelm them with joy, evoke their laughter to take a break from being some form of warfare, and so they can finally just be fun.
They would know safety by name. I wish my poems had the authority to command.
Their hairbows and barrettes to strangle the politics out of their scalp.
I wish their teen years were full of questionable fashion choices instead of bullets and protests.
I want to fill their stomachs with butterflies.
From fresh cuts and with adolescent boys.
Boys that we do not view as men instead of all this grief and pain.
From all this trauma, they are force-fed to digest.
I ain't never seen black folk birth sorcery to protect the woman these black girls will grow up to be. Isn't magic a synonym for power?
How about we give that to the poets?
Imagine a world where poems were turned into spells.
Where I could do more than inspire.
Where I could do more than comfort. 'Cause I hear the phrase black girl magic a lot. But days like this, all I could taste
is curse.
Mum calls me a hero. Dad calls me a young king.
Twitter calls me a monkey.
So many legends share my skin.
Shop security still follows me as soon as I walked in.
The restaurant said there was no reservation for my booking.
My job application got rejected because of my surname.
My school teacher still couldn't pronounce my first name.
They judge me
before they even meet me. I had less opportunity, less accessibility.
He didn't just stop me and search me.
They beat me,
cuffed me,
literally hurt me.
I'm surprised I survived.
Council estates,
Care homes,
and school exclusions.
they planned, they prepared me.
Me for the prison system.
It's like it's one rule fits all.
Although I was different.
I lack confidence. I'm insecure. Got less hope.
Lack of representation in our system.
Hatred and racism.
I'll never understand.
Mum still calls me a hero.
I'm a young black man.
So,
That was really, really lovely and insightful. It was riveting. So yeah, I've got some questions for you before we open up to the audience. Through your work, you've managed to not only capture life around you in the communities that, as you mentioned, presumably you feel more home in or identify with, but you kind of went the extra mile to actually raise awareness of many social issues and sort of improve the welfare of the communities that you feel that you're a part of, that you've captured. So was this, I think you kind of mentioned this earlier, but was this like a natural sort of choice for you to make this extra step, or was it like a very conscious decision that you made?
I'd say it was a bit of both, to be honest. So, as I said, when I started out, I didn't see many photographers from my background who told the stories that I needed to see, I needed to know was possible. And if I have the opportunity to do the work that I don't see available, why not do it? So that's the reason why I just continued to do what I needed to do. And yeah, I feel we need to create our own spaces in which we can grow into, and being bold enough to do so is what makes the wider community say, "Oh, okay, let's see what they have to offer."
I was wondering also, in the way that you're raising awareness of these social issues, so some of them are more sort of fairly more well established, and some that are actually quite lesser known, at least to the wider audiences. I was wondering, do you feel that you're tackling ignorance, or do you feel you're more simply telling stories and sort of sharing knowledge?
Again, I hope I'm doing both. So, as a photographer, I know a lot of photographers want to be at the forefront and they work behind. But for me, I want my work to be in front and for me to be way behind. I don't want people to know who I am. I just want my work to say, so that way, in order to tackle the biasness of the society, you kind of want the voice that is coming to tell them what the problem is to be unknown. Because once they find out who's actually saying it, it leads to, let's just close our ears. And I've learned by doing this and staying behind and let the work go forward, you kind of hit the targets that you need to hit, and then conversations begin.
It becomes more about the story and the image rather than whoever took it.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned, actually, the two of your main influences were Gordon Parks and Roy de Caveira, and obviously they were both quite prominent African-American photographers in the sort of mid-20th century, weren't they?
Yeah.
So one was more sort of a photojournalist, and he had more political themes in his work, whereas the other was more sort of fine art. And actually, he kind of wanted to avoid being too political. I think they were kind of almost like polar opposites in a way, but had some similar communities that they were capturing. Would you agree that your work perhaps incorporates both in terms of the sort of style and intention of these two quite different photographers?
So as you said, Gordon Parks was more political and more outspoken, whilst Roy de Caveira was more. His work. Out of the two, to be honest, I would say Roy de Caveira inspires me more because his work is so raw and so beautiful that you're just like, wow. Every time I see his work, it's like, wow. Gordon Parks, one of the best, but when it comes to the two, I'd say Roy de Caveira simply because his way of showing Harlem of his time period, it's amazing. So you're actually feeling the emotions of Harlem. You're actually feeling the dance scenes, the music scenes, the club scenes and everything that's going on. And it really puts you into that time period. And I want my photos to be putting the viewers in that time period. I want my photos to feel as if the person who's viewing it was actually the one behind the camera. And with Gordon Parks, he does that exceptionally well. But he was more in line with the Life newspaper. So it was more depending on what was allowed by the editor was what was shown. And then when you actually see the work which is in his collection, you're like, wow, this is amazing. But his most famous works are what is allowed by the editors. Whilst Roy de Caveira, him and what's his name, Langston Hughes, they made a book called, I think it's the Sweet Nectar paper or something like that. I can't remember. And like it brings poetry and it brings like you see photography as poetry but in a visual form. And I think that's something that I want my work to actually replicate.
And so, despite the fact that a lot of time has passed since the era that was captured by those two photographers, this must be what 50, 60 years ago now. Are there any parallels or similar themes that you feel you've observed or captured between, say, their work and yours? Especially there are some issues that might have been in common.
There's a lot of issues still in common, to be honest. Like if you watch, if you actually view either of their works and you compare it to today, not much has changed. Sorry, not much has changed at all. And although it's good in one aspect, it's actually sad in another, because you'd see that when it comes to the beauty of the community, it's still the same. But when it comes to also the struggles of the community, it's still the same. So there hasn't been much progression. But yet, the only thing that's changed is the aesthetics of the era. And that's it's kind of sad.
That's true. Another thing was, you also, I think I read somewhere that you also mentioned that Vivian Maier was also another influence on you.
Yeah, definitely.
And I picked up on this because she's also a personal favourite of mine as well. And the reason why, I read that you liked that sort of cinematic style because you liked to take photos that were looked like the stills from a movie.
No, definitely.
So I was wondering, because of that, are there any films or directors that might have influenced their cinematic styles influence your photography?
No, I wouldn't say so.
No?
But I'd say despite Roy de Caveira and Gordon Parks, the most sought after photographers that I'd look for if I need inspiration outside of it would be female photographers. I don't know what it is, but female photographers have a more emotional capture in their photos than male counterparts. A lot of male photography is really cold. I don't know how to put it into words, but if you see it, it's kind of cold. It's like, okay, cool. But then when you see someone like Diane Arbus, or you see Helen Levitt, or I forgot their names, there's real emotion in their photography. And it's very rare to find that same emotion in male photographers. I'm trying to think of someone that has... I
can see what you mean now that I think about it. And only when you just said it, I kind of realised what you mean, actually. So another thing I read that you mentioned was like, and also you mentioned it earlier as well, you found that the lack of diversity in the creative industry was quite a challenge for you. So that might be an obvious question, but what do you personally feel is the reason for the lack of this diversity, and what do you think can be done about it?
Lack of diversity in the community. I mean, in the creative industry. It's a tough one, you know. Like, it's a really tough question to answer because it's basically due to how society's been structured over the last 300 years that has led to this lack of diversity in majority of the industries in this country, or in the creative industry, especially in this country. In order to change it, you'd have to like overthrow the whole mentality of the past 300 years and start afresh, and that's not really going to happen. So what you have now is you have the token diversity, but the inclusivity of things doesn't really exist. So you'd have that. So in the creative industry, and I'll be honest with you, you'd have I'll say you'd have the token black person there, like myself. Let's say the token black person, like myself, in the industry. We're there. We're not doing much. We're not getting the opportunity to do much. But when push comes to shove or something gets lit, we tend to be used as, oh, but look, he's there or she's there. Do you understand what I mean? But now when it comes to the actual board movement and actual doing the works and getting the works done, it's like you're non-existent. So you have to continue to fight for your position. And until companies are willing to bring a board, or like a board actually, that's more diverse and represents the voices of the people that they want to cater for, it's not going to happen. So I'll give you an example. So I think 2 months ago, in November, so after Black History Month, in November, Adidas called out all the playmakers in their pool. So once you get into Adidas photography, you're in a pool, and like depending on what work you do outside, you either move up in the pool or you stay in the pool. And so you get invited to a meeting, a cultural diversity meeting. Now everyone think, oh, you're getting called up to Adidas to have this meeting. Yeah, you get your stuff paid for and blah blah blah. But then when you actually go to the meeting and you're there, you see that it's the people who are going to actually make the changes are not diverse. It's just one set of people. But then they're saying that they want us who are of the diverse community inside that same room to give them the ideas for them to then go and be diverse, which doesn't really make sense, because it's like, for example, me saying a woman's fight for safety, a woman's fight for equality. I can understand it, but I haven't experienced it. So it's best I can't then go and start making projects or talking about something that I have no experience. I've got to let her, the woman, explain and be at the forefront to make that change and make it happen. And what she says is needed, I follow. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But it's not the case most of the times in these situations. It's, okay, we've heard your idea, but we could always just do it this way. We'll take your idea on board and we'll just go this way. So then what happens? They mess up and they come back to square one. And then you continue to tell them, this is what you need to do. Let me take the lead to show you what needs to be done. But I don't know if it's the fear of losing power or what it is, but it never really happens. So in order to change the lack of diversity within the industry, you just need to start afresh. But that's never going to happen.
That leads me to my final question, which is, when you first started out as a photographer, you actually hid the fact that you were black. Is that right?
Yeah.
And you noticed once you revealed that engagement and support actually dropped.
Yeah.
So if you could go back in time, would you still do the same, knowing what you know now?
I would have done it earlier.
You would have done it earlier?
Yeah, I would have done it earlier.
And also, what would you advise other up-and-coming, not just photographers, but any creatives to do in starting out?
I'd say understand it's a very tough industry that you're going into. There's a lot of hurdles, unnecessary hurdles. You'd have to work probably 50 times better than, not even 3 times, 50 times better than everyone else. And even then, it's simply down to having one person that says yes to you to actually change your career. So, for example, for me, it was one creative director who was within Adidas that saw my work and said, you know what, I'm going to give you a shot, I'm going to push you forward. Do you know what I mean? So even once you're in Adidas now, you have the situation where you have to have a reference. So they don't give you a job. I'm telling you, whoever wants to be an Adidas photographer, this is basically everything you need to know. So they have a reference for you. So if another creative director wants to use you or work with you, they're going to ask someone who's already worked with you how you are to work with, right? And most times the creative director has his own, within that pool, he has his own set of photographers who he doesn't change with, right? So that's why you see, for example, when you see an Adidas commercial, Adidas, or any of the branded work, you see that a lot of the photography that is done in it is always the same. There's no real change. There's nothing really new. It's always like today the season is 2022 season. If you look at 2021 season, the difference is very minimal. And this is how it is. Do you know what I mean? So then if you were to be a radical creative and you wanted to go somewhere further, unless you have like one or two creative directors that are going to back you to do what you need to do, you're never going to get the opportunity. Do you know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you for answering my questions.
Yeah, no worries.
It's time to open up to the audience. Anyone got any questions? Hopefully be quite easy to listen to them.
Hello. I was wondering if you could remember the first time you ever took a photo and you thought, actually, well, that's a good photo, and what it was of and what camera you took it from.
I don't know. I think my first photo was probably up in on the slide. Probably it's some man standing in the mist. It was taken on a Canon 7D Mark II, 50mm lens. In order for me to say it was a good photo, I'd say it was my mum that said it was a good photo. Because when I started out and I was taking photos, I used to go to my mum and say, "Mum, check this. What do you think?" Because she doesn't know about photography. And this is when actually I knew that photography, in order for your photos to be good, a person who has no interest in photography needs to be like, "Wow, this is a good photo." Do you know what I mean? So in the first week of photography, I'd go to my mum, because I'd be out every day on the streets, I'd be shooting. I'd go to my mum, "Yo, mum, check this. What do you think?" She'd be like, "What are you doing, man? Just put this down. Go back. Just do something else." And I was like, "Oh, man. All right, cool." So then one day I took a photo and I bought it. And she's like, "Yeah? Okay. I see it now. Let's see. Is it a one-off?" I said, "No, okay, I got you now." So then I continued taking photos, and I took a couple. And then I showed my aunties who got my first camera for me. And they were like, okay. It's not that bad. It's interesting. And then from there, I just continued. But again, if you really want to grow as a photographer, I wouldn't suggest showing your work to other photographers. Do you know what I mean? Likewise, I wouldn't suggest studying under other photographers, even though there's a whole photography university course and everything. I wouldn't suggest this because why? How I see the world is how I'm going to try and pass it on to someone else. And how you see the world might be completely different. But if I tell you that what you've created is wrong because it doesn't fall into my box, then I've destroyed your creativity. And I don't think that's right. But if I show it to someone who's completely like oblivious of photography, oblivious of anything creative, and they're like, "Wow, this is a really good photo. Wow, this makes me think of the time I was growing up and I saw this and that," then you know, okay, you're on the right path for whatever genre of photography it is that you're going through. And this is what I live by. So I would never go to a photographer and say, "Yo, check this for me. How do you think? What do you think?" Because they're always going to tell me, "Oh, you could have done this, you could have done that." And you don't need to hear that. Not to say that criticism is bad, but if you're trying to find your own voice, you kind of need to get it from a place where no one really cares and go with that. So hopefully that answers your question. Anyone else?
Have you found any inspiration for certain guidance from other photographers' work, like photo booths or something. Have you watched many photographs and learned from different styles, or how have you developed your own?
I'll be 100% honest with you, bro. For the first 3 years of photography, I rejected looking at anyone else's work. I said to myself, there's no way, because I didn't want to fall into a box where I become a replica of another person's work. Do you know what I mean? So not to say that once I've actually understood photography for myself and know what I want to do, then I started to look into other people's works. But at the beginning, when I was trying to find my voice, I said I can't use another person's vision to create my own. I need to create my own vision. And then from there, once I've created my own vision, I started to see, okay, if he does it this way, how can I do it better? Or how can I do it differently? Because by then, I've already know who I am as a photographer, and I'm not trying to start out. So this is what I would suggest for you, is make the mistakes, do what you need to do. Don't dive in too deep into photo books. I know this is sounding weird coming from a photographer. Most photographers say you have to look at the books, you have to do this, you have to do that. I'm totally against it. Do you know what I mean? I believe you have to be as raw as possible. Like being clean cut, university cut photographer, it gets you the commercial and all that kind of stuff. But if you want to leave a legacy, if you want to actually leave your own legacy, you got to do it your own way. And a lot of the people that the universities follow and tell you to look at did it their own way. When you talk about David Bailey, he did it his own way. When you talk about HCB, he did it his own way. All of the photographers that we look up to and we study in university are the same people that did it their own way. So why am I not doing the same thing? Doesn't make sense. I might as well do it the same. And then once I reach a stage where I know who I am as a photographer, then I'll start to see, okay, when he reached this stage, what did he do next? Or how did he do it next? So this is what I'd say for you as well. Hopefully, I'm gonna give you as real advice as possible. Do you know what I mean? I'm not gonna give you no university book advice. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Maybe this question, if I use a personal example. So for example, like growing up, I grew up in the council estate to myself, right? And I guess like looking around, there weren't many people who kind of wanted to go down the sort of educational route that I went down, as you sort of spoken about, sort of, sport and sort of stuff like that. And so, when I sort of ended up coming here and won scholarships, like these good schools, what I did was I literally went back to my council estate and I took pictures. I mean, my pictures were taken of me in my like posh uniforms or whatever. And the main reason I did that was because I wanted the younger guys and girls growing up in the state to kind of see that look, just because you're from here doesn't necessarily mean that you can't, it's not that you need to go to like Cambridge or whatever. It's whatever you want to sort of go and be able to do. So at the same time, for some people, they need to be directly in proximity to that person. But for other people, perhaps you might see that photo and think, cool, he's done it, I can do it too, even if you're not from my environment in particular. So again, what I'm trying to get is, for you, how do you see that sort of idea?
I think it's important. I think if you're talking about seeing photos of people that look like you in positions that you want to be in, is very important. It's important to be to see. But if you're talking about actually creating the environment for people from backgrounds to know that it's it's possible to be more than what is expected of you, it's important too. And you're talking about photography, in terms of photography, to actually use photography as a means to do so.
Yeah. Is that something perhaps you see in your work at all? Is that something you think about?
Oh, definitely, 100%. I run workshops in London for the youth, for example, and a lot of the youth that join, hopefully this is answering your question, tell me if it's not there, yeah? So a lot of the youth that join the workshops are coming from the council estate, and most of them don't really rate photography as anything important. But it's my job now to introduce photography to these youths. And I don't introduce photography to the youth as a means for them to become photographers. What I've learned as a photographer is with music allows me to tell my story, right? But I'm not changing my mindset. I'm just telling my story. It's very rare that a musician is going to change their mindset in the thing. So you still see someone, he's telling a story, he's telling what he's been through, but he's still the same person. Whereas as a photographer, because I have to take into consideration so many different variables. I have to take into consideration when I'm walking in the street, why is it that I'm taking this photo? What has led me to take this photo? Why is it that this person is of interest to me? All these questions and reflections means that my mind can no longer be narrow. I have to start thinking broader, right? So when I do this with the kids, with the people that sign up for the workshops, it's a means for them to see that they can be more than what they were thinking they could be before. Do you know what I mean? So with photography, I use photography in these situations to open up minds. Because photography really and truly, if you really get deep with it, it makes you think completely different to how you were thinking before. And a lot of these kids are lacking that. So a lot of the kids, yes, they need that person who is the inspiration, that role model and everything. But sometimes they haven't got the mindset to do so. They haven't got the mindset to achieve it, right? And from experience, photography opens up those different thought processes that allow them to see that that person who's there, who they've taken as role model, is possible to achieve, and the different routes that can be done. I don't know if that answers your question. You sure? All right, cool. So,
I think I was going to ask, so with your street photography, when you started or now, did you find that, because I was thinking this with street photography, you kind of have to get used to being in the street and being in public space. Did you find that being a black man, there were more issues with that, or that there were more sort of walls that you found with the public when doing street photography?
For me, to be honest, I'll be honest with you, because of because we grew up in the streets, right? It was like how we were living on the streets before, and how photography came and changed the whole perception of living or being on the streets. It was like an easy transition. So I'll give you an example. So when you're growing up in London, or if you're growing up in Northwest London, for example, or South London, you develop, if you're on a council estate and you're trying to just survive, you grow up a tactic or a skill which we call scanning. Now, scanning is basically a means in which you can identify a danger, identify a possible threat, identify anything that is moving within your vicinity that might cause you a problem or might cause you an issue, right? So then with that tool or that skill set, you then learn how to use different things to protect yourself. So for example, if I'm walking down the street and I don't know what area I'm in, right? And I feel someone's following me, or I feel someone's seeing me that shouldn't see me, I'm not going to turn around and go, is this guy following me? That's just that's just caused a whole big problem. What am I going to use? I'm going to use the windows. I'm going to use the mirrors. I'm going to use the car windscreens. I'm going to use all these different tools to see what is going on behind me or next to me, right? So now if you take that whole mechanism and you bring it into photography on the streets, right? It's a whole different ballgame. Because now if you see a moment that you think is interesting, you're thinking, how can I capture this without causing an issue? How can I tiptoe into this person's circumference without alerting them and making them feel a certain way? So then you start to use the same tools that you were using to survive as a means to make your photography. So you start to look at the mirrors, you start to look at the windows, you start to look at the puddles, all of these things, and you start to create your images from there. So this is how it is, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's how it works. Any other? Yeah.
So earlier you described photography as like sort of a visa, a license to enter into people's homes and lives. I was just wondering what you think it is about the camera that gets people to sort of open up and to trust you and to sort of reveal more about their lives than perhaps they would if it was just like a conversation.
So with the visa, I'm going to call it visa, okay? You've got a tug of war that goes on, okay? So in the tug of war, if you pull too hard, you lose out. If you're too soft, you lose out. So you kind of got to find like a middle a middle ground when dealing with these people with the visa, right? And when it comes to, like, let's say, for example, I'm going to talk from my experience, when it comes to being in the council estate or being in an area where there's a means for people to break out of the cycle, means to be socially available, as in terms of social media and ever, offering the tools for them to do so means that they no longer see you as a threat, but as a means to get their goal. Okay, so with the visa, this was the case, and this is the case up until now. A lot of people want to tell their story. They don't know how to tell their story, so they rely on someone who has a camera, they've seen can actually deliver the story to actually come and tell the story. So if you were, say, for example, to go out anywhere with your camera, confident, not timid, confident, but not arrogant. Okay, you were timid, you were confident in what you were doing, and you were to speak to anyone in the street with your confidence, right? And this confidence will come across to that person or to that subject that you want to document, right? And then from there, you'd see that they open up for you based on the vibe that you let off. So we call it a vibe, but confidence is what it's really known as. So the vibe and the confidence that you let off is what's going to open the doors for you. So again, it's a tug of war. If you go on the streets as well, if you go too tough, if you come out too arrogant, a lot of people are going to say, no, you can't take my photo. If you come out too soft, especially as a woman, sir, unfortunately, if you're too soft, a lot of people are going to say no. Do you know what I mean? So it's like you have to find a middle balance on your pool. So hope that helps. Is that okay? Yeah.
When you said earlier, when you talked about like living in the UK and how everything was so much more colourful, like would you say that comes across in the use of colour with your photographs? Because obviously, like I think a lot of the photographs, like on the slideshow and just in general in London, seem to be black and white. In series like the Route 306, so by the bus route, like that was on the same colour. But would you say in general that like when you do the UK,
I don't know. Like as a photographer, I've kind of transcended into different phases within my career. So I started out pure color, which I could probably show you in a bit to show you when I started out photography. My photos were pure color. I wanted color. I loved color. But then when lockdown came in, and I started to experiment with making film and developing film myself, I fell in love with black and white because it just gave my story a more direct approach. Whereas with color, you could take a photo of color and the color distracts from what the story is that you want to tell. And also a lot of photographers use color to mask a really bad photo. So black and white kind of strips away that and you kind of just focus on it. So that happened. 2020, I learned how to develop by myself. I started to shoot black and white. But then when I actually started to shoot black and white, I realized that for me, London, I don't see the Western world in color. Because when I shoot outside, most of it is gray and red anyway. So I might as well shoot in black and white. But when I get to places like Egypt or Gambia or Sierra Leone, a lot of it is colorful. So in order to give it justice, I have to shoot in color. So that's how I see it. But if I'm shooting, let's say for example, I'm shooting something which I need to tell the story of, even if it's in like Africa or anywhere, I'll shoot in black and white. So, yeah. Hopefully.
Just congratulate on your work. I found it interesting that you said that you didn't derive any inspiration from film, because this, like the aesthetic, just feels a lot like something like Stephen King would probably work on. What is like your end goal? Like, what are the projects that you want to do? Because obviously you mentioned working with brands and stuff like that, and trials and tribulations, possibly working with people like that. What are the projects that really like inspire you to get up and move? Like, what do you want to do?
So for me, I sat down with my dad about 2 years ago. I said, Dad, listen, look, this is the commercial photography and this is my legacy. Yeah? I have no interest in shooting commercial work. None of it. It doesn't pick me up in the morning. For me, it's all about how can I create a legacy that when you talk about Brunel Johnson, you're seeing positivity, you're seeing work that really made a change, right? So my end goal isn't even photography. Like, photography came about by accident. I never set out to be a photographer. I don't plan to be a photographer much longer. Like, I just want to do, like, I've been exposed to charity work where I've seen how charities really work, and I've said to myself, okay. And I've seen the power of photography in aiding charity work. So for me, my end goal is to bring about a change within West Africa using positive photography, but also doing the work that actually needs to be done. So a lot of it is going down the NGO route, but I'm in control of the narrative. I'm in control of the images that are coming out. I'm in control of the projects that are really getting done. So that's my goal, end goal for a photographer. Do you know what I mean? But as in to say I want to be a commercial photographer, nah. Do you know what I mean? So if you're asking to become a commercial photographer, ask now, because I can give you all the information. There's nothing I'm going to hide, because I'm not interested in it. I could pass it on. But that's my goal. So my goal is to control the narrative that is coming out and to actually make a change positively in something that has been like stereotyped for generations. Yeah.
You see what you said earlier about like confidence and like, so I do it like time photography, not what it is. It's very much like the fact that I can, I can make myself invisible when I need to be. I kind of what you're saying. It also never occurs to me that other people don't do that. I was like, wait, you don't like do the kind of slight look over your shoulder, like 360. But I'm just thinking, like, how did you go about developing the confidence to go more into portraits where you are very visible? I'm just thinking, like, when you spent like so long in like toning that side down, like making yourself smaller, making yourself less like authoritative, making yourself very much like amenable, like how did you find developing the kind of confidence to be in charge, be like, be the kind of person that people can, it's like very like radically visible, do you know what I mean? Because I think for me, the difference between like, letting people do their thing and, taking it from a distance and them being very much like, very connected to you.
So again, that will come down to the mentor that I met. He told me something that really like hit home for me. So with the distance photography or the street photography that is documenting from a distance where you're like the fly on the wall, it always feels as if the story is not finished. Do you know what I mean? And in order to actually finish or complete the story, you have to become visible. Do you know what I mean? So when he told that to me is when I started to say, okay, you know what? If we're gonna make this happen, we gotta make this happen. Do you know what I mean? It was difficult because, again, it's like it's a game that you're playing with people, especially when you're doing it on the streets. So I'll give you an example. You see someone who's dressed amazingly, pink hat, pink top hat, pink suit, interesting face. You've got to approach this person. You can no longer take it from afar. You can't shoot, like I've never shot from a 150 millimeter lens on the streets. It's impossible. Yeah, that makes it even more weirder, to be honest. So you've got to get this person's attention. You've got to get this person's approval, and then you have to get this person shot in a way that you know is going to be worthwhile for you, right? So learning the hardest part, which is what I always tell the kids, is to approach the person, to actually become from invisible to visible, right? And as I was saying, so what's your name, sir? What's your name, sir? Sophie. As I was telling Sophie. Oh, what, Sophie and Sophie? Okay, cool. Yeah, as I was telling Sophie before, is that tug of war that you go through at the initial meet and greet with that person is where everything is won or lost, right? So if you go in too aggressive, like, yo, let me take a photo, you've lost. Because most times they're going to be fearful, and that's going to come out in your photos, right? And if you come out too timid or scared, most times you're going to say, no, what's this person? This person's a weirdo, freak. Get out here. Do you know what I mean? But if you have the right balance in which you do that tug of war and you enter into this space, you know, I just have to breathe, right? So every time someone says yes, I take a deep breath. I go, cool, yeah? So then I know the minute I've taken that breath, I've got about a minute or two to really get the photo that I want, right? And then it just comes with practice. So you just tell them, listen, I think you look amazing. You compliment them, always wins, right? Can I just get you to please stand over here, stand over there, whatever. You know what, can I just get you to look up? And all of that kind of stuff, and then just go from there. So a lot of the time is from doing and learning how to do that, when it comes to shooting people like, let's say for example, Messi or whatever, it's really quick. Because you've only got 5 minutes with each celebrity, really and truly. So in that 5 minutes, you've got to perform. Do you know what I mean? So why not perform on the streets where if someone says no, find out someone else. Do you know what I mean? And the worst thing people can say is no. Do you know what I mean? But I have a mentality in the back of my mind that everyone comes out ready to be photographed. No one's coming out looking their worst. Do you know what I mean? Everyone's coming out looking their best. It's how you approach them to get that photo and make it happen. But yeah. Any others?
Almost everybody in this audience If you've got any more questions, feel free to join us. Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for having me, honestly. No,